10 spine-chilling encounters, sinister secrets exposed in a cursed Appalachian house. The air crackled with dread as Sarah stepped over the threshold of her grandfather's old house. It loomed like a beast, whispering secrets, lurking in the shadows. "Welcome to your nightmare," it seemed to say. Shadows danced in the corners, and the floorboards creaked like ghostly fingers beckoning her deeper inside. She shuddered, but this was her chance, a break from the suffocating grip of cramped apartments and endless bills. A better life for Emily and Jake, she reminded herself, constantly battling the gnawing unease creeping up her spine. The first night, she barely slept, racing heart punctuated by muffled whispers that slithered through the house's dimly lit halls. The children were restless too, their laughter fading into nervous glances. Sarah wanted to shake it off, tell herself it was the stress of moving, but dread clamped down. Days passed, and they settled in, but the excitement quickly soured like spoiled milk. The neighbors' eyes weighed heavily on them. Cold stares, murmurs shared over cups of coffee in weathered porches. Something was wrong. Something about this place felt rotten, the air thick with hidden truths. Then, the flickering light started. One minute they shone bright, the next, they plunged into darkness. And whispers wafted through the air, like a tune only she could hear, a sinister lullaby coaxing her into a world of nightmares. "Mommy, there's a man in the trees. He's watching us." Jake's innocent voice shot through her, a frigid stab of fear. She dismissed it, chalking it up to imagination, but that gothic shadow was just a fluke, wasn't he it? Her thoughts raced, echoes of her grandfather's estate drilled into her skull, pressing her to dig deeper into its past. That accursed house. That's what the townsfolk said, wrapping her in fear like a lace shawl. A family curse entwined with strange disappearances that gnawed at her skin. The more she asked, the tighter their lips became, neighbors' eyes narrowing as if she were digging up dead spoons from a graveyard. There had to be answers waiting for her in the attic, a dusty journal or a forgotten relic. She climbed those creaking stairs, heart hammering in her chest as groans of wood filled the silence, and then she found it. An old journal burrowed beneath boxes of cobwebs. Each page turned revealed a sordid tale, secrets she wasn't prepared to uncover, strange rituals, dire warnings. Her family's legacy threaded with darkness, twisted like vines. Fear coursed through her veins. Was this why her children acted strangely? Why they clutched each other, dancing around shadows? Then came the old man, her neighbor. Kind and helpful at first, but his smile never quite reached his eyes. The weight of his gaze felt like thawing ice, chilling her to the bone. He knew things, old secrets tucked away like loose change. Was he a friend? Or a foe draped in warmth? Just as thoughts twisted and bubbled in her head, she saw Emily and Jake standing by the yard's edge, entranced by a flickering figure silhouetted against the dying light. The air grew still as if the world held its breath. "Stay," a chilling whisper unfurled in the night, sending tremors through her entire being. She fought the urge to run to her children, heart clawing at her chest, questions spiraling in her mind. What should she trust, the watchful eyes of the town or the cursed legacy of her home? With a dread seeping deeper into her soul, she stepped closer, ready to confront the darkness unfurling before her. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As Sarah clutched the fabric of her thoughts, the figure turned, a face emerging from shadow. It seemed familiar yet frightfully alien. She fought the urge to scream as chilling recognition settled in. Questions stormed through her mind. Is the past truly behind her, or is the darkness about to swallow them whole? What sinister pacts had been made beneath the dying moonlight? The truth awaited, all she had to do was reach for it. Soft moonlight poured through the trees, casting long, ghostly shadows across the yard. The figure moved closer, and Sarah's breath hitched. This was no trick of the light, the man in the trees wore her grandfather's face. A smile twisted his lips, but it was a smile that carried no warmth, only an icy reminder of what had been buried beneath the years. "Come closer, Sarah," the figure beckoned, the cadence of his voice pulling her in like a tide. But something deep within her screamed to run, to clutch her children tight and never look back. Instead, she felt herself stepping forward, each stride heavy with a weight she couldn't shake. "Mommy!" Jake yelled, his voice shaking from fear. Emily tugged at his sleeve, her eyes wide with innocence and confusion. "Don't go. Please, don't." The words clawed at Sarah's heart as she fought through the fog clouding her mind. This was not the grandfather she remembered, this was something else, something dark that had claimed his likeness. "What do you want?" she managed to ask, her voice quivering like autumn leaves in the wind. "Your family," he said, a chuckle escaping his lips that sounded more like the raspy groan of old wood. "They're bound to this place. And so are you." Before she could process that chilling declaration, a cold wind whipped through the trees, rustling the leaves. They whispered secrets that curled around her ears, luring her deeper into the shadows. She turned her gaze back to the children, their faces lit by terror, and in that instant, clarity struck her. This was about more than her. This was about their lives. Suddenly, the shadows around her began to dance, coiling and twisting like serpents. Sarah's heart raced as panic soared within her. "Jake! Emily!" she shouted, moving towards them. But their eyes were glazed, entranced as if caught in a spell. "Do not resist," the figure hissed, his voice a slithering serpentine sound. The air thickened, stifling her breath as the ground pulsed beneath her feet. Reality warped and twisted, and for a brief moment, she felt the whispers of despair wrap around her like chains. "No!" she cried, sprinting towards her children. She grabbed Jake's shoulders, her fingers digging in urgently. "Wake up! We need to go." Strain filled her voice, she could feel the pull from behind her, urging her to give in, but she fought against it with every ounce of her being. In that moment, as she pulled the kids away from the looming figure, the shadows recoiled. The laughter turned to ghastly wails, swirling around them in a deafening melody of anguish. The ground trembled as if reacting to her defiance, but the moment was fleeting. As she turned to escape, a hand gripped her shoulder cold as ice. The old man, her neighbor, stood ominously behind her, his eyes dark voids of despair. "You can't leave, no one leaves," he rasped, voice cracking like dried leaves underfoot. She twisted away, adrenaline surging through her veins. With her children in tow, they dashed toward the crooked path leading away from the house. Each pounding footstep echoed in the silence, but the haunting whispers lingered, curling around her senses. Just as they reached the tree line, a blood-curdling scream sliced through the air, rooted deep within her. She stopped, breathless, turning back. The sight froze her heart. Her grandfather's face contorted in pure rage, the old man's sinister grin illuminated by an otherworldly glow. All at once, it dawned on Sarah, this wasn't just about escape. It was a fight for their souls against a darkness intertwined with her bloodline. With the promise of dread filling her, she knew she had to confront the truth looming behind those eyes. "Sarah!" A voice bounced off the trees. It was Emily, her small hands shaking. "He's coming." Panic spiraled again, deeper now, gripping Sarah's throat. As she bolted forward with her children, the echoes of the past and the infused malevolence chased them relentlessly, the cursed legacy clawing at their heels. But what awaited her in the heart of Appalachian darkness remained cloaked in shadows, compelling her to question. What if the truth was more haunting than any nightmare they could escape? What secrets would the darkness unravel next? The chill of the night settled over Sarah as they stumbled through the underbrush. Branches clawed at her arms, and the shadows danced like lost souls around her. Her heart thundered in her chest, each beat a reminder that they were not free yet. "Mommy, I can't run anymore." Jake gasped, his small legs pumping as hard as they could pant. Emily's whimpers echoed in the dark, and her grip tightened around her brother's hand. No, you have to keep going. Sarah urged, feeling the pressure behind her, relentless and hungry. The malevolent whispers were back, swirling like mist, embedding themselves in her thoughts. She glanced over her shoulder. The figure was still there, moving with an unnatural grace, gliding over the ground, his face an agonizing mask of fury. "Mommy!" He getting closer. Jake blurted, panic igniting in his voice. "Don't look back," Sarah instructed, forcing her legs to move faster. She pushed through the branches, each crack and snap echoing in the stillness. The darkness seemed too thick, almost alive, wrapping around them, weighing them down. "Where do we go?" Emily cried, her little face pale and drawn. "Just keep running." Sarah shot back, but uncertainty rumbled in her gut. They had to find safety. They had to find a way to escape this nightmare. Up ahead, she glimpsed a faint glow piercing the black void. Sarah squinted, hope igniting a spark in her chest. "That way." "The cabin. It's just ahead." They sprinted toward the light, but that hope seemed to flicker as shadows whipped around them in a frenzy. A low growl rumbled from deep within the trees, making the ground quake beneath their feet. "Mommy! What is that?" Jake's voice trembled, but she couldn't answer. All she could focus on was the light growing brighter through the shroud of trees. Just as they reached the cabin, a sudden silence enveloped them. The oppressive weight of fear faltered for a moment, but dread didn't dissipate, it morphed, and Sarah sensed a new danger lurking behind the billowing darkness. "Stay close," she urged, pushing the creaky door open. The hinges protested, an ominous sound that echoed through the night. She stumbled inside, pulling her children with her, and slammed the door shut. The interior was dimly lit by a single flickering candle resting on a table, casting long shadows on the aged wooden walls. Dust motes danced in the air, and an unsettling mustiness filled her nostrils. "Is it over?" Jake panted, scanning the room with wide eyes. "I don't know," Sarah whispered, leaning against the door, straining to catch her breath. She stole a glance outside, but there was nothing, only darkness and a foreboding silence. Then, the candle flickered more violently, casting demonic shapes around them. Sarah hesitated, glancing at the children. "We need to find a way out of here." "Where's south the nearest road?" Emily asked, her voice tiny, as if the shadows themselves could swallow her whole. "I have no idea. I just know we can't stay here," Sarah replied, heart racing again. She turned, scanning the cabin for possible exits. Behind her, a small door creaked open on its own, darkness pooling like ink just beyond the threshold. Its depths promised unknown horrors, shadows whispering secrets to those daring enough to listen. "What's that?" Jake pointed, his gaze fixed on the door. A cold draft seeped in through the opening, wrapping around them like an icy grip. "Do we go in?" Emily asked. Defiance surged within her. "We have to know," Sarah breathed, stepping toward the doorway. The air thickened with tension, and she hesitated. But terror lingered close at their heels, lurking in the night, and she knew she couldn't let it win. With a deep breath, she glanced back at her children, their faces mirroring her own fear. "Stay close, let us find out what's waiting for us, what could lie in the shadows that beckoned so enticingly. What horrors were about to unfold." The musty air of the cabin pressed down on Sarah as she stood at the threshold of the small door. She could feel the cold seep into her bones, a creeping dread knotting her stomach. With a trembling hand, she pushed the door wider, revealing a narrow staircase descending into profound darkness. The flickering candlelight barely illuminated the first few steps, and she could feel the weight of something unspeakably sinister below. "Mommy, I don't want to go down there." Jake whimpered, his small voice trembling. "Neither do I, but we have no choice," Sarah replied, gripping her children's hands tighter, as if that could ward off whatever lay ahead. She took a cautious step down, the wooden steps creaking under her weight, a mournful sound that echoed in the stillness. With each step deeper into the unknown, the chill intensified. A whisper curled around her, intrusive and taunting. It was hard to decipher the words, but the tone was unmistakable, malicious and mocking. Jake and Emily followed closely, their breath hitching in unison as an unseen presence wrapped itself around them. The staircase opened up into a small, dimly lit cellar. The air was thick with mildew, and the faint smell of decay hung heavy. Several jars lined the rotting wooden shelves, filled with murky substances. Sarah's stomach churned. She had to look away from the curious objects that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. "Look, Mommy," Jake said, his voice quivering. He pointed to a corner, where dust lay thick, disrupted only by footprints, large, heavy imprints that led deeper into the shadows. "Do you think someone lives here?" Emily whispered, eyes wide, fear etched across her tiny face. Before Sarah could answer, the ground beneath them trembled with a soft, calculated growl that resonated through the very walls of the cellar. No, it wasn't the walls that shook, it was something much closer, something lurking beneath the wooden planks, its breath hot and oppressive. A gut-wrenching instinct told her they weren't alone. "Quick! We need to find a way out," Sarah urged, her heart racing as she scanned the cellar for an escape. The hushed whispers grew louder, wrapping around her like a curtain of dread. Suddenly, the candle flickered violently above them, the light illuminating a figure at the top of the stairs. A tall, ominous shadow loomed, features barely visible. "You shouldn't have come down," it rasped, voice low and haunting. Panic clawed at Sarah's throat. "We didn't mean any harm. We're just trying to silence." The shadow growled, stepping closer, its eyes gleaming like polished stones. "Once you enter the darkness, you can never return." With one frantic motion, Sarah grabbed her children and spun around. The door behind them had swung shut, the wood thudding with a finality that crushed hope. They were trapped. The darkness surged forward, enveloping them, and the cellar echoed with sinister laughter, a sound that promised untold horrors yet to come. "Mommy!" Jake cried, panic igniting his voice. "Hold on to me!" Sarah shouted, her voice trembling as the shadows pressed in, wrapping around her like tendrils, chilling her to the core. "What do we do?" Emily sobbed, biting back her own fear. Sarah searched the shadows, desperately looking for anything that resembled a way out. "We fight," she declared, though her own voice shook with uncertainty. But as she braced herself against the cold stone wall, the ground erupted violently, sending them tumbling backward. The darkness howled around them, drawing closer. What had they awakened? What was truly waiting just beyond the reach of the light? The air thickened with a terror that clawed at Sarah's throat, squeezing the scream from her lips. The ground beneath them was alive, alive with something vile and hungry. She felt the icy grip of dread that made every hair on her body stand on end. "Mommy!" Jake's voice rang out, full of helplessness. "Stay close!" she yelled, her thoughts racing. They were trapped, surrounded by darkness that felt almost sentient, whispering secrets that were meant to be buried. She scanned the cellar again, heart hammering in her chest, searching for anything to fight against the growing shadows. Then she saw it. A glimmer of faint, flickering light in the corner pushed back against the wall. "Over there!" Sarah shouted, her voice shaking with both fear and urgency. She yanked her children toward the light as if it could save them. Maybe it could lead them to a way out. The fleeting brightness danced like a star in the overwhelming blackness. As they stumbled forward, shadows writhed and swirled, hungry whispers echoing around them. "Do you think they'll let us go?" Jake asked, his trembling lips revealing teeth clenching in fear. "No. We will find a way out," Sarah insisted, forcing hope into her voice even as despair clawed at her. Each step felt like running through thick mud, the presence of something watchful making her skin crawl. The light flickered again, seeming to beckon them. Sarah reached it first, hands on her knees to steady her breath. It was an old oil lamp, barely hanging on to flicker life into the cellar. She fumbled with it, trying to catch her breath even as shadows lurked behind her. The whispers grew louder, now swirling with a chaotic melody that chilled her. "Mommy! It's coming!" Emily shrieked, pointing into the black. Sarah felt her stomach drop. The darkness pressed closer, and something massive slid within, the air thickening around the children. "I need you both to promise me," she gasped, her voice cracking. "No matter what happens, you hold on to each other and don't let go. Promise." Jake cried, gripping Emily's hand tightly. With a spark, the lamp ignited, casting flickering light into the corners, revealing horrors too vile to comprehend. The jars on the shelves began to shake, their contents roiling violently, and it was clear what had been hidden in those dark depths. Long, sinewy shapes floated within, grotesque things that had been sealed away for far too long. "No, no, no!" Sarah choked out, pulling her children with her as she stumbled backward, the shadows echoing their laughter, a cacophony that twisted her heart in terror. "Mommy, please!" Jake begged, tears streaming down his face. "I want to let them take you." She breathed, the air thick and suffocating. The cellar shook and the ground heaved beneath them. A figure roared from the depths, a grotesque shadow streaming forward, a mouth too wide and eyes too many. It lunged toward them, all gnashing teeth and claws that seemed to tear through the very fabric of reality. "Run! Now!" With one swift motion, the lamp toppled and extinguished just as the creature lunged, plunging them into a suffocating darkness once more. The whispers crescendoed into a terrible din, the laughter rising to a deafening pitch. Desperately, as she scrambled with her children, Sarah felt the cold tendrils of shadow reaching for them, grasping, pulling. She could sense its breath on her skin, and then nothing but silence. A void that stretched endlessly. In the heart of that consuming dark, Sarah's mind raced. There had to be a way out. She had to find it before it was too late. What horrors awaited them within the abyss? How long could they survive the nightmare that had already begun? The void felt endless, yet a distant sound broke through the stillness. A low, guttural growl echoed in the darkness, a promise of everything wrong. Sarah's heart raced. She held her children close, praying they could somehow meld into her body, become a part of her so that she could protect them from the looming dread. "Mommy?" Jake's voice trembled, barely a whisper against the oppressive silence. "We're okay," she lied, panic bubbling just beneath her skin. "Stay quiet, just for a moment." But moments felt like an eternity, stretching the dark impossibly thin. Without light, the shadows became realities, and she could feel them closing in, wrapping around her in suffocating tendrils. Suddenly, a memory flickered in her mind, a rumor she had heard once, a story about the old owners of the house. They had vanished without a trace. Now, she understood why. The things they had buried were not merely objects, they were sins and secrets that roamed the cellar, hungry for fresh souls. Then, something shifted in the darkness, a crackle like lightning in the storms of her worst nightmares. She could feel the presence moving closer, sensing their fear and feeding on it. "Mommy!" Emily cried again, the sound piercing through the heavy air like a knife. "Shoo! We need to keep moving," Sarah hissed, gripping her children tighter. They took a single, tentative step forward, each footfall a fragile promise. Suddenly, behind her, the growl morphed into a laugh, a horrible, sinister mockery that knotted Sarah's insides. The shadows surged, and she felt the air go cold, the breath of something ancient brushing against her cheek. "Where are you, little ones?" The voice taunted, slithering through the dark. It was oddly familiar, echoing the distorted timbre of something she couldn't quite place. "You cannot hide from me. We have to go," Sarah urged, her voice a harsh whisper. They moved, shuffling, stumbling in the dark, each brush against the walls sending chills racing down her spine. Every corner held a secret, tensely wound up like a snake ready to strike. Then, light burst through a weak, flickering glow ahead. She dashed toward it, urging her children along. But as they approached, the light revealed more than a way out. It showed them the truth: the cellar was lined with mirrors. Sarah's pulse quickened as they reflected the growing shadow behind them, a monstrous form, the outline shifting and reshaping, ever changing, an echo of their deepest fears. "Mommy, look!" Jake shrieked, pointing at the mirrors, but Sarah couldn't bear to look. Every reflection would just show what they were fleeing from, an inescapable truth, a relentless hunter that wore their fears like a cloak. "Don't! Keep your eyes on me!" she shouted, more to herself than to them, feeling the pull of despair. "Focus! We can outrun it." Emily squeezed Jake's hand, her other hand reaching for her mother. "I'm so scared." As Sarah stumbled, she caught a glimpse of movement in the mirror, a flicker of a face, twisted and malevolent, eyes like black holes ready to suck them whole. She felt the world tilt as she backed into the wall, a rush of terror flooding through her. "Run! Keep going!" she cried, pushing her kids forward, the light flickering like a heartbeat, their lifeline in the hostile dark, but the darkness recoiled at their defiance, a wave rolling back, and the laughter erupted again, louder, angrier. They moved quickly, driven by raw instinct, the glimmer of a way out drawing closer. The shadow stalked behind them, relentless and insatiable, a creeping horror that didn't just want to trap them, but to consume them, and then, just as they reached the edge of the light, the whispers dulled into an ominous silence. In that moment, she saw it, a trap, an illusion. The exit was nothing but a figment, shimmering like a mirage. "No!" Sarah screamed, halting her children just a breath away. The growl returned, louder now, vibrating through the walls, and with it, the shadows lunged, snapping through the last vestiges of hope. "Mommy!" they gasped as the shadows flared, swallowing her promise whole. What awaited them in the depths of this nightmare? Would they see the light again? Or were they forever lost within the walls of a cursed past? The chilling laugh echoed, bouncing off the mirrored walls, and the warmth of their sanctuary faded. Sarah grabbed her children's hands tighter, feeling the perspiration pooling in her palms. The shadows surged closer, the growl morphing into a cacophony of whispers. Each murmured word felt like icy fingers trailing along her spine. "Mommy, where are we?" Jake whimpered, his little voice trembling. "We're right here," Sarah managed, though the words seemed hollow, swallowed by the darkness around them. She couldn't let him see her fear, she had to be brave. But the hold of panic tightened around her chest like a vice. As they stumbled in the dim light, the reflections in the mirrors warped, the edges curling into grotesque shapes. Each shimmer highlighted their fears, their regrets. How could she protect them when there was nowhere safe to go? "Sarah," the voice slithered closer, echoing in a way that chilled her soul. "Don't you recognize me?" The voice sliced through her confusion, slipping through the bitter fog of terror. It was there, just underneath the laughter, the answer she didn't want to acknowledge. Sarah turned slowly, her eyes darting to the nearest mirror, illuminating the figure that danced in the glass. It was her own reflection, yet so twisted. The eyes burned with an unholy light, a dark glimmer she knew was not her own. "Mommy!" Emily screamed, practically yanking Sarah back from the reflection. The child's grip was fragile yet desperate. "Don't, please don't look." But it was too late. The copy in the mirror began to smile, revealing rows of jagged teeth that seemed to extend deviously into the darkness beyond. "Run!" Sarah shouted, the command tearing from her throat as she whisked her children towards the far end of the cellar, where she could now see an outline. An old staircase, warped with age and creaking under the pressure of time. They pressed forward, but emotion hissed in their ears, a multitude of anguished voices spilling forth. They pleaded, they mocked, reminding her of choices long buried. Each step felt heavier, as if the shadows themselves were dragging them down. Panic surged through Sarah, igniting that primal need to escape. She urged her kids onward, each footfall resounding like a drumbeat in the stillness. "Almost there," she shouted, but doubt gnawed at her guts, a sinister reminder that the exit might only lead to darker depths. As they reached the staircase, the whispers grew louder, shouting fragments of truths she didn't want to hear. Faces began to swirl in the mirrors, each one a snapshot of suffering, begging for release. Jake stumbled, the light flickering, and he fell hard. "No, no, no." The air grew frigid as shadows coiled around his ankles like snakes. "Jake!" A low rumble vibrated through the ground as the darkness coalesced, the cold tendrils pulling him back. Sarah lunged, arms reaching, heart racing, but the shadow figure laughed, a discordant melody of despair that echoed in the very marrow of her bones. "Mommy!" Emily screamed, pulling on Sarah's clothes in a frantic attempt to keep them anchored. "Stay with me," Sarah commanded, her voice tearing through the din, a desperate attempt to keep her family united against the impending doom. Her eyes clamped shut for a brief moment as she fought off despair. In stark clarity, she steadied herself, pushing past the terror. "Let him go. You can't have him." The voices fell silent, cutting off their cacophony just at that moment. A palpable pause hung in the air, but it was merely a trap. They were ensnared, weighed down by the unfathomable darkness, where the truth warped around every heartbeat, and then, the shadows rippled as something wretched broke free, lunging toward them, something unknown, horrid, and hungry. A slick shape emerged from the darkness, features indistinguishable yet completely terrifying. The light flickered once more, and as it dimmed, Sarah's primal fear spurred her to lunge forward. With one final push, she called out, "Run!" Would they escape the monster that lurked within, not just outside, but inside themselves? Or was the light always just an illusion, waiting to dim into a more profound darkness? Heart pounding, Sarah flung herself and her children up the staircase, the wooden steps creaking under their weight like the groaning of a dying man. The darkness seemed to stretch around them, unfurling like a living thing, grasping at their ankles, daring them to slow down. Emily's small fingers entwined painfully in Sarah's, while Jake stumbled again, the fight to keep his footing sapping whatever courage he had left. "Mommy, I can't." His breath hitched, panic flooding his voice. "Just a little further. We're almost there." She yelled back, forcing a tremulous smile despite the icy grip fear had on her heart. With every step, the world around them felt like it was collapsing. The air grew thick, as if it was trying to choke them, the whispering shadows swelling like a great wave behind them. Each word, every taunt seeped into her mind. "Why did you leave me?" one voice lamented. "Don't run from me. I only want to help." "No, no," Sarah thought, shaking her head violently. They needed to escape. They had to break free, find the light, find safety. As they neared the top, the cold tendrils of darkness suddenly coiled around her legs, pulling her down. She stumbled, crashing hard against the wooden railing. "No!" she cried out, fear punctuating her words. With feral strength, she vaulted forward, dragging Jake up with her, while Emily's eyes widened in horror. "There!" Sarah pointed to the door at the end of the hallway, faint light bleeding through the cracks. They surged forward, each of them fighting against the specters that whispered heartless secrets. The door loomed closer, hope blossoming in Sarah's chest. But with each step, an unseen force pressed against her, wrapping around her like a suffocating shroud. The shadows screamed their relentless accusations. "Why did you let him go? You couldn't save him. You chose this." "Shut up!" Sarah screamed, clenching her teeth in defiance. The sound echoed in her ears but felt swallowed by the darkness. Finally, they reached the door. With trembling hands, she pushed it, the aged wood creaking and groaning like an old man awakening. Daylight beamed through, but it was not as inviting as it should have been. Before she could think twice, Sarah surged forward, dragging her children behind her. They tumbled through the doorway, landing in a heap on the damp, grass-strewn ground. Sunlight poured down, bright and blinding, wrapping around them in a warm embrace, a soothing balm after the chill of despair, but the relief was short-lived as laughter erupted behind them. They all turned, the door slamming shut on its own accord, sealing the darkness inside. A shadowy figure lingered in the doorway for just a heartbeat, its twisted smile unmistakable. "Are you really free?" it jeered, voice echoing with a haunting resonance. "No!" Sarah screamed out, fear coursing through every vein. But the figure faded into the dark, the echoes of their pain lingering like a bruised memory. "Mommy, what was that?" Jake mumbled, trembling beside her. I don't know, but we have to keep moving, Sarah replied, instinctively glancing over her shoulder, waiting for the shadows to creep back. They stumbled onto a path that led away from the house, but the laughter still echoed, growing fainter yet somehow closer, a cruel reminder that freedom was never guaranteed. As they made their way through the thick trees lining the trail, Sarah's thoughts twisted like thorns around her heart. Was this truly an escape? What waited for them outside this wretched place? A sharp noise crackled in the brush, a rustle that felt all too deliberate and too familiar. "Keep quiet," she whispered, instincts flaring. The trees shivered in response, and above them, the sky darkened. Shadows stretched, mocking her escape. Movement flickered in the corner of her eye, a glimpse of a figure darting between the trunks. "Run!" she shouted again, her voice trembling, as the darkness followed close on their heels, a lurking horror refusing to be left behind. What awaited them in the fading light? Would they be hunted by the shadows, or would the shadows hunt them? Endlessly. The forest loomed ahead, dark and daunting. Sarah's heart raced, pounding like a war drum in her chest as she pulled Jake and Emily hurriedly along the narrow path. The trees twisted overhead, their gnarled branches clawing at the sky, or perhaps reaching out for them. The sense of being watched pricked at her skin, sending chills coursing through her bones. "Faster, kids! We have to hurry," Sarah urged, her voice almost rising above the whisper of the wind. The laughter, cruel and mocking, rippled through the air, taunting them even as they fled. It was a sound that ignited something primal and fearful within her. A knot twisted tighter in her gut as the echoes chased them. "Mommy, I can't keep running," Jake cried out, breathless and trembling. A sob threatened to break through the edges of his voice. "Just a little longer," Sarah promised, though she could feel their strength waning. Panic slithered around her thoughts. Where were they going? Was there really a safe place, or would the shadows find them no matter how far they went? Just then, a deep growl resonated from the brush, low and guttural, chilling her to the bone. Sarah whipped around, eyes scanning the thick undergrowth, searching for the source. But the shadows didn't reveal their secrets easily. Her heart thundered louder than the growl, each beat a question: what was hunting them? "Mommy," Emily whispered, her small voice a fragile thread above the rustling leaves. "We have to climb," Sarah suddenly decided, glancing up at the thick, gnarly branches of a nearby tree. It looked impossibly tall, but the thought of hiding in the boughs was more comforting than facing whatever lurked in the dark. "Grab onto my back," she instructed. Using her motherly instincts, she hoisted Jake up first, arms straining as she placed him onto a sturdy branch. Emily followed, her small body trembling as Sarah helped her find a foothold. They perched together in the tree, hearts hammering, breaths coming in quick bursts. Sarah caught sight of movement below, a shadow darting through the underbrush. The figure paused, and in the brief moment of clarity, the face caught the light only briefly before it vanished. The chilling smile was unmistakable. It was that same twisted grin, the one that had followed her from the house. "Stay quiet," Sarah hissed, as fear threatened to push her over the edge of panic. She held her breath, darkness swarming below, waiting for them like a predator. But they weren't safe yet. The laughter rose again, this time closer, echoing in the canopy like a malignant specter. The shadows gathered at the base of the tree, pulsating with a life of their own. "Mommy, I'm scared," Jake whispered, his small face pale against the rough bark. "It's okay, honey. Just hold on tight," she said, forcing the words through gritted teeth as dread seeped into her bones. But inside, she wondered. How long could they hide? Then, just as she thought they might have a moment's reprieve, a voice sliced through the air, sharp and loaded with malice. "You think you can escape me?" It echoed, each word drenching her with a cold sweat. "Oh God, they're playing with us," Sarah thought, her mind racing as she tried to devise a plan. What if it wasn't just the shadows? What if something worse awaited them, something that lived in the darkness and thrived on fear? Suddenly, a guttural roar erupted, shattering the brief facade of quiet. The ground shook as something large crashed through the underbrush beneath them. "What's that?" Emily squeaked, her eyes wide with terror. Sarah's heart sank. "We need to move," she warned, adrenaline flaring through her veins. Before she could act, something lunged from the shadows, darting upward towards them, snapping branches in its wake. "Climb higher, quick!" she shouted. That sense of eternal pursuit clung tighter as they scrambled, the racing steps of terror closing in. But would they reach safety, or was this just the beginning of a nightmare that would never end? What other horrors awaited them in the deepening wood? As darkness fell, one question lingered ominously: was this a cursed forest, or was the curse inescapably tied to them? As the darkness thickened around them, Sarah felt the weight of dread gnawing at her heart. The forest twisted into a living entity, branches closing in like skeletal fingers. She tightened her grip on her children, the warmth of their tiny bodies a stark contrast to the chills racing down her spine. "Keep climbing," she urged, panic igniting her voice. They scrambled higher, limbs trembling as they ascended into the boughs. Each hoot of an owl felt like an omen. The shadows swirled below, hungry whispers blending into a sinister symphony, promising they would find her. Sarah wasn't just escaping the forest, she was running from every haunting memory that had followed her into these cursed woods. Just then, the branches rustled violently beneath them, the ground vibrating with an unnatural force. "What was that?" Emily whimpered, eyes wide as saucers. "Just a trick of the dark," Sarah lied, her heart pounding a tattoo of fear. "Stay close." With trembling hands, she swung them onto a higher branch, desperation fueling her actions. But the shadows writhed, condensing into a mass of darkness that shimmered with hunger. Sarah's breath caught in her throat, her fingers twitching as she clenched her children tighter. The laughter was back, sharp and mocking, reverberating through the air like thunder. A single thought pierced through the chaos: run. They couldn't remain static, hiding would only draw the shadows closer. Suddenly, she spotted an opening in the branches, a narrow path leading deeper into the treetops. It felt like their only chance. "Follow me," she shouted, leaping forward, urgency igniting within her. The treetops seemed to sigh underfoot, as they made their way quickly along a low branch, a momentary reprieve from the threat below. "Don't let go," she reminded, looking back at her children's fearful faces. But just as they reached a split between the branches, a natural fork that led to a glowing patch of sky, Sarah glanced behind to see the shadows swirling upward around the trunk. No. It was a primal roar, a guttural sound that shook her to her core. "Climb." The moment they lurched forward, a large shape burst through below, sending splintered wood raining down, their cries merging into a horrible echo. Sarah kept climbing, her limbs screaming from exhaustion, but there was no stopping now. The laughter grew loud and shrill, the shadows were relentless. Suddenly, an idea flickered in the back of her mind. If darkness feeds on fear, then maybe, just maybe, hope could fend it off. "Look at me," she shouted, forcing a brave smile, her voice carrying over the cacophony. "We can scare it away. Picture something brave. Think of the happiest moment we've had together." Jake glanced at Emily with wide eyes, confusion etched on his tiny face. "But what?" "Just do it," Sarah urged, feeling the darkness shift and pulse beneath them, as though it recognized the weight of her words. "Think of our trips to the lake. Remember the laughter." Realization flashed in their eyes. They began to laugh, tiny giggles breaking against the encroaching shadows, and for a heartbeat, the laughter echoed around them, a counter-symphony to darkness. "Louder." Sarah pressed, gripping the branch tighter as their laughter grew, brighter and more innocent. The shadows faltered, momentarily shrinking back, the sounds of despair hesitating in their mouths. Sarah seized the moment as they reached the tipping point, near the glowing patch. She bolted through, dragging her children behind her, a fresh surge of determination washing over her. With a final push, they leapt from the branches, tumbling onto soft earth as bright sunlight blasted their exhausted faces. They gasped, All three of them, lungs filled with the dizzying scent of pine and life. They weren't just free from the branches, they had escaped the forest's grasp, or so they thought, but the laughter still echoed, trailing off into the distance. Panting, Sarah grabbed her children tight, glancing back towards the tree line, a dark shimmer still lingering at the edges. "Mommy, is it really over?" Jake's small voice trembled. I think so," Sarah whispered, but doubt clawed at her heart. That darkness could always return, it felt woven into the very fabric of her being, a legacy that clung like a second skin. Emily squeezed her brother's hand, seemingly understanding something deeper. "We can't go back, can we?" she murmured, her voice so small it almost snapped. "No, sweetheart. We can never go back," Sarah replied, that crushing weight settling back on her shoulders. That it wasn't just about the forest anymore, it was about her family, their journey, and the past that couldn't be erased. They needed to heal, to find a way through the darkness that lingered within. The shadows might have chased them, but they blew the first breath of smoke away. "Let us go home," Sarah said with renewed determination. As the trio turned, a new chapter unfolded before them, but the shadows would always be waiting. Yet Sarah had learned one vital lesson through the struggle: her family was worth fighting for, their laughter could shatter the darkness. Together, they began to walk forward, one step at a time, towards the elusive promise of light and healing. The world awaited them. But in the hushed silence behind, the forest kept its secrets, waiting patiently for the next time it would whisper its terrible songs. Did you enjoy this gripping conclusion? You need to subscribe now to catch our next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now. It's your chance to feed the algorithm and help us grow, and flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about what could happen next. Finally, don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this thrilling conclusion.